If you've come to this video wondering graphic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to resize this just a little bit, as I want a little bit of that ground in the background and the five, come into our color mixture and turn down the greens, and then play around with our oranges as well. Then I'll come into our sharpening layer, put that up to around 40%, and maybe just a little bit of contrast and a little bit of desaturation. Well, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this a new smart object. Bring a tiny little bit forward so we've got those shadows coming across, and then I can just play around with our Gaussian blur. Convert this to black with our color overlay, come to filter, and then go to Gaussian blur. What we'll do is we'll put a Gaussian blur of 4.0 on it. Change this to overlay, just turn down the opacity to around 30%. And then we can see it just kind of gives that contrasting glow and that shadow that we were looking for. And then again, I can just play around with the sizing myself, where things are sitting. And we can see how much better that looks just with that shadow there. Now for my next step, what I'm going to do is get an exposure layer, turn it all the way down, then press Control I. Sorry, I'm actually going to press Control I again and put it around 3.17. Then I'm just going to draw in our light source where the actual light would be coming from. And we'll move into the face, and we're just going to draw a little bit more of the highlights onto the face just so we can see his facial expressions on the actual graphic. And we'll just continue to play around with it like so. Then what I'm going to do is come back into our stadium layer, and then I'm going to chuck a warming photo filter onto it and just play around with the density just so we can get some oranges and some colors matching our kind of stadium background we've got going on. I want a bit more blue and a little bit more yellow coming in, so we'll play around with our shadows just to get those colors kind of coming into the graphic. Then what I'm going to do is come back into our Kayla Navas graphic on our layer, and we're just going to continue to slightly draw in where the light will be coming across from and just fix up any areas we may have missed. Just continually fixing it up like so, and just putting a little bit in between his feet and around his shorts. Now what I'm going to do is come into our color balance. So we'll come to our adjustment layers and then select color balance. Put a little bit of yellow tinge on it just because we've got that yellow coming from the background. And then we'll also put a warming photo filter onto him just so we're getting that orange balance as well, but we won't have the density as strong, and we'll probably put it on to normal just so we can get a little bit more of that orange coming into the render. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to group together our grass layer here. I'm going to come to our hue and saturation. I'm going to create a clipping mask, and we're going to turn this kind of saturation pretty down, but then we'll turn our lightness up just to around +2, and change the greens just a little bit because I want that kind of darker green effect so the green isn't as strong. What I'm going to now do is actually put a bit more of an exposure burst around our graphic. So I'm going to increase the exposure, and I'm going to press Control I on this just so we can actually draw in where we want our exposure burst on our render. Just want a bit more stronger colors coming onto his face and around his arms. And then I want a little bit of a kind of gradual burst around where the actual light is, just so it looks like it's actually fading onto our image a little bit more than it already is. And we can see the difference that makes it look a lot more realistic with our lighting. Then what I'm going to do is hold down Control on our layer, and with that orange we previously selected, I'm going to press Control Shift Alt and I, make a new layer, and then hit Alt and Backspace. Then we'll turn this to our linear dodge add, moving once to the right, and then deleting the extra layer that I just made as we don't need it. And we can just see that kind of gives it that orange turn for our background, just matching for the colors we've got going on. we'll skew it. Then we'll grab the Arsenal logo, clip it to the rectangle as well, resize it, and then skew it too. Then we'll again create another rectangle. So what I'm going to do is create a flat shape that is small with a little bit of height on the top. And we'll click off it. And then we're going to zoom right in, and we'll make sure this is in line, like so. And then what we want to do is we want to move it up so it's standing out. We'll get our red font. We're going to use Dharma Gothic E Bold, and then we'll type in City Ground. I don't know if it's the City Ground or just City Ground, but we're going to go with City Ground. We'll turn down the size of it, and then we're going to make sure this is in the middle, and then middle for our text, and then changing the VA slightly. And what we might actually do is just increase the size just that little bit more so it stands out. Again, we'll make sure it's in the middle. Then I'm going to press Ctrl Shift Alt and E, come to our